Southeast Prisoners of War Association.
The conflict in East Asia has often been overshadowed by the fighting in Europe, even though hostilities began in this region long before Hitler invaded Poland. The origins of the Pacific War lay with Japan, a country that was dominated by its military and had been rapidly expanding its army since the 1920s. Japanese people were taught from a young age to serve their emperor, whilst the soldiers were subjected to brutal training and were indoctrinated with the belief that it was better to fight to the death rather than surrender. The Imperial Army also taught its troops that as long as they were serving their emperor, they could do no wrong. As with Germany, Japan's economy was affected by the Great Depression, and since the country lacked raw materials, they were dependent on imports from abroad. To ensure self-sufficiency and economic expansion, the militarists advocated seizing control of the resource-rich territories on the Asian mainland. In 1931, the Japanese army invaded the Chinese province of Manchuria, and within 5 months it was under their control. Over the next few years, sporadic fighting persisted between China and Japan, but in July 1937 this escalated into total war when the Imperial Army launched a full-scale invasion of the mainland. Despite their inferior equipment, the Chinese forces put up stiff resistance, which frustrated many Japanese soldiers who had been expecting an easy victory. When the Imperial Army captured Nanking in December 1937, they took out this frustration on the residents of the city. Over a period of 6 weeks, Japanese soldiers indiscriminately killed over 200,000 Chinese men, women, and children. The massacre at Nanking was an early sign that the war in East Asia was going to be one of the most brutal conflicts the world had ever seen. Over the next few years, both sides suffered heavy casualties as the Imperial Army won control of new territory but failed to conquer China. However, in 1940, a new opportunity arose for Japan. France and Holland were overrun by Germany, and Britain was preoccupied with the war in Europe. This left their overseas colonies weakly defended and vulnerable to attack. The Japanese military began making plans to invade the European-controlled states in Southeast Asia, such as Malaya and Indonesia, and then exploit their natural resources. However, it was feared that America would resist any further expansion, so Japan decided that it would have to destroy the US Pacific Fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii to prevent any interference in their activities. On the 7th of December 1941, Japanese naval aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor and sunk or damaged many warships, but crucially failed to destroy any aircraft carriers or vital port facilities. When you heard about Pearl Harbor, what was your opinion?
Horror. Yeah, and we thought at the time that an incalculable blow to the American Navy. Credit to the American Navy, they did recover fast. But I mean, the number of capital ships that they lost there, they lost their base, but they still survived.
On the same day that Pearl Harbor was attacked, the Japanese launched a series of successful offensives across Southeast Asia, which caught the Western Allies completely off guard. By May 1942, Japan was in control of Indochina, Thailand, Malaya, Singapore, the Philippines, Indonesia, numerous Pacific islands, and Burma. The conquest of Burma had brought the Imperial Army to the borders of India, which was now the only major British colony in South Asia that had not fallen to the Japanese. Although Japan was not currently planning on invading India, the Allies intended to reconquer Burma to protect their remaining interests, and also to establish an overland supply route to China. But first they would have to rebuild their shattered army. The campaign to retake Burma would be fought through some of the most difficult terrain in the world that consisted of high mountains, wide rivers, steep valleys, and thick jungles. So, what kind of training did you go through to prepare for your time in the jungle?
You don't have no training hardly. I only had about 3 weeks, that's all. And you were shoved in there. You know, it's all new to you. It's frightening. You hear all these noises, these different insects and things like that, you know. You get these big horseflies flying around. And you get these, there was one about that big, like a bloody rhinoceros, a big heavy thing flying around, and when that hits you in the back, you felt it, you know what I mean? It's of a night time and all, and when you take your pack off your back, because your back is sweaty, then the horseflies come in and they bite you, and you know, it's all sorts to put up with. It's amazing, really. You know, you're hacking your way through the jungle, you're cutting it as you're going through. And then you're going up the hill, you're digging holes for the night, and then the Japs would be down there saying, you know, all right, Johnny, it's so and so, you know, thinking, you think it's some of your lads. If you thought that, let them up, and of course they'd kill you. But I mean, we knew the tricks.
Mm-hmm.
The Atlantic, I was there for practically the whole 1939-43,
mm-hmm.
and then I was out in the Middle East and Far East. We'd sail from Abadan, we called it the arsehole of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd sailed to India and Burma and Ceylon, from there backwards and forwards about 18 times.
So what was the climate like in Burma?
Very hot and very cold.
Did it rain a lot?
The monsoons, good God, yes.
How heavy was the rain?
You never see it here. You might have a heavy shower here and people say, "Whoa," you know. But it rains there, mate, and when it rains, it rains.
How long would a monsoon last for?
Well, it lasts so many weeks, a month and weeks. You get soaked, then the sun comes out and dries you, and then you get soaked again.
Did it ever rain for 24 hours a day?
Oh yes. Well, no, you got a break. You get the sun come out, it dries you, but then you got to keep it. You've got to go to sleep in that wet through.
All that area. So as I said, I've been to Abadan, and sometimes it could be 120 in the shade,
mm-hmm.
and the heat was so much that, you know, when you look on the top of a stove,
mm-hmm.
and you can see the heat shimmering,
mm-hmm.
well, that's how it was like when you're walking down the street.
Really?
And of course I was out there nearly 2 years, so they got to a state that if the temperature drops, because the sand doesn't hold the heat, and it used to drop, and it dropped 40 degrees at night.
Right.
And so we could be 80 degrees and we just put our winter clothing on. Because we got so used to the high.
Mm-hmm.
At 40 degrees in this country would kill people, but 40 degrees down there, we got used to it.
I was in the guerrilla platoon, what they call a guerrilla platoon. There was 13 of us, one NCO and 2 blokes. That's it, 3. There's 4 of us like that, 12 and then an officer. And we was at the back, HQ was there, and A, B and C company was in front there, and we were at the back here. And if A company or any of the companies there was a gun annoying them or something like that, you know, that's holding them down. We used to go round the back and put it out of action, and so they could go on, you know. Or sometimes we have been out where the Japs are coming down there like that, and there's a road like, well, not a road, a path, and they're coming down that path and going that way, and we were this way, and we'd go out, cross the river a few times, and go right onto that T-junction underneath all the growth, and just sit there and mark down the times they come down, and then back again after a day there or a night, and give it to the RAs, the big guns, and then at that time the next day they'd fire and straight on it and, you know, kill it like.
For the next year and a half, the Burma Campaign remained in stalemate, but in the Pacific, the tide turned rapidly against the Japanese. The Pearl Harbor attack had left the American Pacific Fleet without battleships, but by now these were outdated weapons, and it was the aircraft carrier that held the key to success. In May 1942, the Japanese Navy experienced its first major setback when its expansion efforts were halted at the Battle of the Coral Sea. 1 month later, the American fleet won a decisive victory at the Battle of Midway when they sank 4 of Japan's aircraft carriers and severely limited the offensive capabilities of their new enemy. The Japanese suffered further losses during the Guadalcanal campaign from August 1942 to February 1943, after which the tide of the war turned against them permanently. With the opposing naval forces now severely weakened, the Allies began the grueling task of recapturing the Pacific Islands that had been seized by Japan. On every island that the Americans landed on, their troops suffered heavy casualties, as the Japanese defenders always fought to the death, even when there was no possibility of victory, as most Imperial soldiers believed that it was better to die in battle rather than be taken prisoner.
How do you feel about the Japanese during the war? How did you feel towards the Japanese during the war?
Hated them. Because anybody that got a prisoner of war of the Japanese really suffered. My solicitor was a prisoner of the Japs for 5 years, and he finished up about 5 stone something. They starved him and worked him to death like. So it was natural hatred.
Well, they was brainwashed. They was stupid. His Imperial troops, when we started, they was good. I only see them once, but if they were, but the rest of them was, just called up, you know. I mean, if you went on a raid or an ambush and they come along, or even on that that T-junction, they'd be chatting away like nobody's business. Chat, and all huddled together. One grenade among the middle of them, and they've all gone, you know what I mean? Yeah, they were all like that, always shouting.
Whilst the Americans were fighting their way across the Pacific, the Allied forces in India were being expanded, retrained, re-equipped, and reorganized. The majority of these troops were concentrated within the British 14th Army, which consisted of over 500,000 men, 2/3 of whom were from India, with the remainder coming from other Commonwealth states.
The Indian troops, there was one English and 2 Indian troops with us. They're good troops and all, good lads. Oh yeah, mind you, I mean, they were taught by us, so they're smart, they're very smart. The Indian troops are now, you see on telly, very smart.
I mean, we had bearers when we when we were in the Air Force, like, and they'd put your clothes, lay your clothes out and make your bed up and that sort of thing. It's very nice, but I believe the colonials, you know, people that lived and worked in India, treated them fairly rough. Treated them as if they were, you know, well, not the same. Well, of course they weren't the same as us, but they treated them really poor. There was blokes in the Air Force that treat them like that too. I mean, we used to pay the bearers about a rupee a week for doing all that. Well, that was a good job for a bearer, because he was getting, there was about 20 an hour billet. He was getting 20 rupees a week. Of those that would pay him, some of them wouldn't. You know, they thought it was their due to be looked after by these bearers and not pay them. Well, I wouldn't be like that. I thought they were doing a good job, which they were.
My missus used to send me 50 senior service every week in around tins, and I never got one.
Was that due to light-fingered postmen, or just due to...
I know where they went. I know where they went.
Where they went?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Where did they go?
They went to Secunderabad. Because I went to Secunderabad. I took a bloke there that lost his nerve. I said to the CO there, got chatting to him. He was asking me questions, and then he found out I was a regular. He was a regular before the war. So I said, what is it to do here? He said, well, he said, just, you know, jump in the blood wagon and go round picking up stretcher cases and that. Or if not, he said, help the postman. So I went and helped the postman. And this bloke had a big office and he had all these cabinets round. I said to him one day, I said, oh, hang on. He said, I've got to nip down and get some cigarettes. Oh, he said, go in that cupboard there. And I went in that big tin cupboard there. I opened the doors there. It's chock-a-block with players, senior service, cigarettes, tins. I said, where's all these? Well, he said, I don't know where they are. I said, what do you mean you don't know where they are? He said, well, I don't know where the troops are. I said, they're in the bloody jungle, I said, we're smoking bloody dry tea leaves out there. We can't get cigarettes. They're smoking Indian bloody cheroots, Burmese cheroots. We smoke any bloody thing. So I went and told his governor. I went and told the CO. So I said, there's all them cigarettes up there and them lads in the jungle gasping for bloody cigarettes. So he went down and sorted him out. He finished up in the front line, that bloke. Yeah, bloody liberty though. Didn't know where they were. I mean, God blimey, if you don't have to send them to the bloke, just send packets to the battalion. They'd all have a smoke.
We never got, you know, first choice of anything of regards planes, but what we did get, we made the best use of. And I thought the army was very good, under General Slim eventually. He was a good commander. He looked after his men, and the army improved a lot when he was in charge. He was the best commander in India, I should say.
What do you think of General Slim?
Bill Slim, Uncle Bill, yeah, he's great. Everybody loved Bill Slim. Yeah, we loved all the big tops days, Mountbatten.
Did you find them inspirational, would you say?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, he didn't see much of Mountbatten, but of course you can't. You don't expect him to be right up the front with his bloody head shot off, you know. But he was good. Bill Slim, he used to come so far up, you know. And if you was back a bit, he'd have it come round, he'd have a chat, and your other leaders, they'd be there.
By the end of 1943, the Allied forces in India had overcome their past difficulties and were ready to invade Burma, as they were now better supplied and had air superiority. They intended to focus their efforts on the north of the country, where a Chinese expeditionary army, known as X-Force, would launch an offensive with the eventual aim of establishing a supply route to China. This operation would be supported by the Chindits, who would be deployed deep inside enemy territory to disrupt Japanese lines of communication. At the same time, the 14th Army would launch an offensive into the Arakan in southern Burma. But the Japanese had also been making plans and were preparing to launch an invasion of eastern India, which was intended to destroy the Allied armies, isolate X-Force, capture the airfields that were ferrying supplies to China, and maybe even allow further offensives into the subcontinent. In February 1944, Japan tried to divert Allied forces away from the Central Front by launching a counter-attack against the units of the 14th Army that had advanced into the Arakan. At first, the counter-attack was successful, and the Imperial Army managed to surround an entire division of enemy troops. However, the Allies used their air power to supply the besieged division, who fought effectively against the Japanese in what came to be known as the Battle of the Admin Box.
In the first year that I was in the Arakan, we were in a box. The Japanese were all around, like, and they tried to get at us through this box, but we managed to beat them off, like, and that was like, as you might say, the first victory we had against the Japanese.
The Battle of the Admin Box may have been the first victory in Burma, but the Allies had only beaten off a diversionary attack. In early March 1944, the Japanese launched their invasion of India and advanced towards the towns of Kohima and Imphal, which were vital to the defence of the country and for protecting the supply lines of the Chinese Expeditionary Force. By the end of March, the Imperial Army had surrounded Imphal and laid siege to the city, whilst another division headed for Kohima. Realizing the danger, the Allied commanders desperately tried to send reinforcements towards the town, before it was cut off completely.
We went from Dimapur to Kohima. There was nothing there. Kohima was the district commissioner's bungalow, and he's got his bungalow there and his ovens and a tennis court and all that for the Nagas. There was nothing there, so we went back to Dimapur, and that's about, 85? About 60 miles. We got down there, we were just going to have a bottle of beer. Vera Lynn was there at the time, just going to have a see her, when action stations, back in the trucks, up to Kohima, unloaded half the trucks, got on the hill, and he just come round us like that. And that's where we stuck.
By the 6th of April, the Japanese had completely surrounded Kohima, and 2,500 British and Indian troops now found themselves under attack by approximately 13,000 Imperial soldiers.
Well, we could hear them. It's just like being here, and they were down the bottom of that hill down there. We could hear them talking, and you're in a trench here. and there was a district commissioner's bungalow down there. They was underneath that because they got there first, and they was this side of the tennis court, and some of our lads are this side of the tennis court, So, you know.
Does it feel surreal to be so close yet not fighting?
Oh, it's scary. And they were using our 2-inch motors and all, because and as I said in the beginning, we only half unloaded our trucks before they closed round and opened fire.
So did they capture some of your equipment then?
They got a 2-inch motors, and you could hear them putting them in like that. And some of theirs were duds. A bloody good job and all, because they were getting very close.
Was anyone around you felt sort of actually confident during battle at all, or was everyone scared?
No, well, deep down they were. I mean, you didn't show it, you know. You didn't show it. You work. You see, you all work as a team. Mm-hmm. You all help each other out. Mm-hmm. You don't show that you're scared. You never do that. You're always, brave. Come on, lads, let's get cracking and this that, and the other. But I mean, that's bravado. That's just give everybody confidence in it. You see.
What did you do to keep up morale?
Well, the British troops, if they're moaning, it's all right. If they're not moaning, there's something wrong. The British troops are always moaning. This ain't right, that ain't right, this ain't right. Like with Englishmen is today. The government's not right, they're not doing this, the councillors are not doing this. They've got to moan somewhere. Well, while they're doing that, everything's okay.
Did anyone among you actually want to surrender?
Oh no. No, stick it out, no.
Had you heard about Japanese atrocities?
Yes, hell of a lot. One of our trucks was full of some soldiers there with barbed wire in the truck and set fire to. Oh yeah, we know what they were doing.
So, how were you supplied at Kohima?
By airplane, by drops. Sometimes, it all depends who was doing it. The Yanks were doing it, the Japs got it. If our lads were doing it, we got it.
Did you get enough supplies to carry on?
We got through. Mm-hmm. We survived.
On the 18th of April, Allied reinforcements arrived at Kohima and began launching counterattacks against the Japanese positions. The siege was now over, but the battle itself was not, and the Imperial troops put up stiff resistance as they were gradually driven back, and it was not until the end of May that they finally began to retreat from the area.
The reason that he come unstuck was his line of communication was too long. From Japan to the borders of India to Kohima, you see, getting supplies up to his men, getting everything up to his men, just too long. Whereas we was, as you went on, they were coming with you.
As the Japanese withdrew, the Allied forces headed towards Imphal, which was still encircled by enemy troops. On the 22nd of June, 88 days after the siege had begun, the Allies finally reached the city. By early July, the Japanese commanders had called off the offensive and were withdrawing their troops from India. Overall, the operation had been a complete disaster. The Imperial Army had suffered 55,000 casualties, mostly through starvation and disease. Around 17,000 Indian and British troops were killed, wounded or missing, but now the Burma Campaign had turned in favour of the Allies. Throughout this entire time, The Chindits and the Chinese Expeditionary Force had been continuing their offensive, and by August they had won control of the most northerly regions of Burma. However, further operations had to be postponed for several months, until the end of the monsoon season. But finally, in late 1944 and early 1945, the Allies launched a series of offensives into Burma, which steadily began to drive back the Japanese.
So when they began the big offensive with pushing the Japanese back, would you say everyone felt confident of victory after that?
Well, you see, a lot. It wasn't in their mind about anything like that. You know, where are we going next? That was all in their mind. You know, what? Right, we've got Mandalay next, Mactilla next. You know, oh bloody hell, you know.
Just get on with the job. Then.
You just get on with it. You go in, you know.
So,
See what's happening? Oh, they're running. Oh, God Christ, how far are they going to run? You know, we're going to catch them. This is what you get.
It was flipping hard work for the army. I was glad that they shoved me in the Air Force, really, because the army blokes really had it rough.
how did you feel when you heard Germany had surrendered?
Well, as I said, I mean, we wasn't all that bothered, you know. We was concentrating on where we were. Well, I was that, you know, I'm not... The only thing that I thought, well, you know, they'll stop bombing London now and all that, like, because my missus was in London and, you know, so that's the only reason. I think, thank God for that Germany's finished, you know, and then that was it, finished. Never thought no more about it.
Well, how did you feel when you heard the war had ended? Did you feel relieved?
No, because we were out in the Far East then.
Alright.
Yeah, and we said, what about this war?
Well, you was in action practically all the time. You was there, you know, because you was going along, and you know that you was coming across groups of Japanese. I mean, what they used to do and all, they used to go up a hill, or they start digging a hole in the hill and go up like that until they get to near the top, and then they right to the edge, and they take a sod out of the grass or whatever was on there, and they could look down, you know, and then put that back. And you know, you coming along. Now our bloke we had with us, Daddy Warren, he trained with the Japanese before the war, you see. Long before the war he trained with them. And we used to come across, like, be held up by these people up, sort of firing down on us like that. And he used to turn around and say, what's holding you up? They're up there, you know. Ignore them. Go round the back and he'll catch them. He knew their tricks, you see. But you had to be careful going round because there'd be booby traps there, lines across. Japanese helmet, you know, you pick it up and the bloody hand grenade would go off. Or come across a hole where they dug a trench and put bamboo shoots sticking up like that. You jump in it and you're stuck in it.
Did they booby trap everything they could find?
Oh, they booby trapped as you went along, yeah.
By July 1945, most of Burma was back under Allied control, and plans were being made to retake the rest of Southeast Asia. Also by this time, the Americans had won control of most of the Pacific, had destroyed the Japanese Navy as an effective fighting force, and were now planning to invade Japan itself. Even worse, Japan's war economy had been wrecked by an Allied submarine campaign that had wiped out most of their merchant navy, and by US bombing raids that had ruined many cities and killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. Overall, the Japanese were beaten and stood no chance of victory, but to much of the population, unconditional surrender was unthinkable. Their government was aware of this and instead hoped to negotiate with the Soviet Union in order to achieve a peace settlement that would be favourable to Japan. What they did not realize was that Russia had already agreed to join the Pacific War on the Allied side. On the 26th of July, America, China and Britain issued the Potsdam Declaration, which called on Japan to unconditionally surrender all of its armed forces or face prompt and utter destruction. But the Japanese government was still hoping to persuade Russia to broker a peace agreement, and consequently made no reply to the ultimatum. On the 6th of August 1945, the US Air Force dropped one of the world's first atomic bombs on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, and 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Approximately 200,000 people were killed, and large portions of both cities were reduced to rubble in a matter of seconds. On the same day that Nagasaki was bombed, Russia destroyed all hopes of mediation by entering the Pacific War and launching a massive invasion of the Japanese-controlled province of Manchuria. Within days, much of Manchuria had fallen to the Soviets, and the Imperial Army had suffered its worst ever military defeat. On the 15th of August, the Japanese Empire surrendered to the Allies. Debate has persisted ever since as to whether it was the atomic bombs, Russia's entry into the war, Japan's hopeless situation, or a combination of all three that caused the government to accept the Potsdam Declaration.
Do you think the atom bomb was necessary?
Oh yes, yes, yes. It must have saved 1 million. It killed several 100,000 Japanese, but it probably saved millions of Japanese and American and British and other Allied troops their lives, because they would not have given in. They would have fought a bitter end. And the Americans estimated 500,000. It would cost them 500,000 men, and probably us as well, because our job would have been to drop into Singapore, recapture Singapore. That was what they'd planned for us, us and an Indian Airborne Division.
Do you think the atomic bombs were necessary against Japan?
No. That's one thing I don't agree with. No. The bloody it was over. They only did that because of Pearl Harbor. That's my view.
Do you think Japan would have surrendered anyway?
Of course they were. They was beat. They only dropped the bloody bomb because of the Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
That's it. As I say, that's my view. That's what I think.
The Second World War ended on the 2nd of September 1945, when Japanese officials signed the Instrument of Surrender. In total, more than 60 million people lost their lives during the conflict, making it the most devastating war that the world has ever experienced. For those who had survived, it was time for them to get on with their lives. But most would never forget their experiences, or those who would never return.
Tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today.